What I'm actually finding out is, from experience right here, and I wouldn't be surprised if the museum and all these other places around hadn't found out the same thing, that you don't have as many people interested in history as we should have. And it seems like this last generation or two right here, if it ain't happening today, and they ain't interested in it. They don't want to wait till tomorrow. And if it happened 2 weeks ago, they don't care about that either. You have to be patient if you're going to be in the history business, because you got a small percentage of the population that's actually interested in it anymore. The way I got here, I was 22 years old, and the only thing in the world I owned was a wife and a 9-month-old baby. And a man run a feed mill in my neighborhood, and he called me and said, Atkinson Mill is for rent. And so I told the man, I said, look, I ain't got no money to go into business. I said, the only thing in the world I own is this wife and this baby right here, and I don't even have a car to drive. I said, I'm walking a mile every morning to work and a mile every night to get home, but I don't miss a day's work. And so he finally decided, well, you know, maybe if I sell you a load of corn on a credit, maybe that'll work. I said, well, I don't know. Here I am, 22 years old, and I ain't doing nothing like I'm doing. And I said, we'll try that if you want to. And so I asked him, I said, look, you know them people that own that old grist mill? And because I'd never seen this place. And he said, yeah, I know. And he said, I said, well, look, if you want to now, because I ain't got no way to travel. And I said, why don't you just go ahead and rent it for me? Well, here I was. That's the stupidest thing anybody ever done in their life, was go to rent something, they're going to make a living on it, and had never seen it. And I tell you, for a long time there, I wondered why in the world did I do this. And but I borrowed my daddy's old pickup truck after about 2 or 3 weeks, and put what little bit of furniture I had on it, and give my boss man that I was working with then, give him a notice. And so put my furniture on that old truck, and I come off up here to Atkinson Mill. Well, when I drove in the yard, I saw the weeds were about waist high. I said, oh my goodness, nobody ain't mowed the grass lately. And I got to looking at it, and nobody had walked in the Millhouse door in about almost a year. So there was no business here whatsoever. And I think one of the biggest things I'm proud of in that situation is I worked for Wiley Mitchener, W.J. Mitchener Company, and Micro hardware store and all that stuff. And I'd been with him a couple of years, and so I got ready to leave, and he told me, he said, man, I don't know how you're going to make it, son, because you ain't got no money. And I said, well, I don't know. The man said he'd sell me a load of corn on a credit, so I'm going to give it a try, I reckon. So what I'm very proud of is that Mr. Mitchener, one of the finest people I have ever known, told me, he said, it's going to take a lot of money to run that place now, and you don't have it. He said, you're going to have problems. He said, but look, I'm not trying to keep you from going up there. I'd love to see you do something for yourself if you can. And he said, I just want you to know, if you need another $1,000 and you get broke right quick, you come down here and I'm going to let you have another $1,000. And I was quitting work with that man that day, and he was going to loan me $1,000. I think that what you got to look at in that situation was that was half a year's work. I wasn't making but about $2,000 a year to start with, and he was going to loan me that much. And I had he found out that we had a baby. I just got to tell you what a great guy he was. And he found out that we had a baby at our house and didn't have no washing machine. And so he told me to take his old pickup truck and go to Kinley, the Dobbin Bailey's, and get me a washing machine and charge it to him. Well, I had never been able to pay him a dime on it. And when I got ready to leave, he gave me my month's check for $180. Well, I knew I owed him $165, so I signed the check and I gave it back to him. And I said, I don't want to leave here owing you money. And I said, cash this check and get your money. He said, no, sir, I am not going to cash that check. Said, you're going to need every penny you can get. And said, I am not worried about that money. If you ever get that money, you're going to come back and pay me, and I know you are. Well, I went back once a month, and I paid that man that $5 on that washing machine. And I don't know how long it took to pay for it, but it seemed like a long time. And but that's just the kind of person he was. I just wanted to put that in there. And we were always friends. All our life we were friends. But anyhow, I got up here, and you know, I finally got inside the Millhouse door, and I was looking around. I didn't know what in the world this stuff was. I had never been in a grist mill before in my life. And them old big old millstones that you grind meal with, I looked at them things, and they were right slick, you know, where they'd been worn down and everything. And I thought it was a big block of wood. And the guy with me, and I said, how in the world is a big old block of wood like this grind cornmeal? And he said, that ain't wood, man, that's solid stone. Well, I reached over and hit it with my fist, you know, a couple of times. I said, daggone if it ain't it? I mean, that's when I found out that I was going to be grinding meal with a stone instead of a wooden block. And I was pretty dumb. I really was pretty dumb, and I won't get no better fast, I'm going to tell you that. But I got in here and got started, and found out right quick I didn't know nothing about what I was doing. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, I bet I made a big old mistake by coming up here, but I ain't got no choice now. I'm so broke I can't go nowhere else. And of course, some of the neighbors come down and, you know, let me know the history of this place, and that 3 people had gone broke trying to run it in the past 3 years. And in fact, one of them told me, he said, did you have a job where you come from? I said, yes, sir, man. I ain't never missed a day's work in my life. He said, well, and he had all his friends with him too. You know, there were backup friends there. And he said, I'd suggest you go back and see if that man will give you that job back. He said, there ain't no way in the world you can make a living at this place. Everybody that comes here goes broke. And I said, well, I'm already broke. I said, I'm so broke right now, I can't go nowhere. All I can do is go to work and hope for the best, you know. So that's what I did. And of course, I found out that I didn't know what I was doing after I tried to get the stones to work and the water power to work and all that stuff. So I went up to the store here and I asked them, I said, do y'all know anybody that has ever worked down there at that old mill? I said, I need somebody to tell me something, you know. And they told me about a guy by the name of Ashley Johnson. And he lived back over close to Flower Hill, back over that way. And I didn't know about these roads around here. I got lost every time I got a half a mile away, you know, because I didn't know about this country anyway. But went over to see Ashley, and he was, he was out in the cotton field picking cotton that day. And man, I crawled along there. I picked more cotton that day than I ever picked in my life. And my daddy always wanted me to pick cotton, and I never picked much, but I picked a whole lot of cotton that day for Mr. Ashley because I needed some information out of him. And but he'd sort of laugh a little bit once in a while about, you know, me coming over here and not knowing nothing. And he said, boy, you got yourself in a mess, ain't you? I said, well, maybe so, but I'm gonna work my way out of it, you know. And but he said, well, I tell you what, I'll run over there late that day and look at your stuff. And well, he told me, he said, crank up 70 more millstones there now, turn that old water wheel on, you know, get them going. And man, we couldn't get no decent meal out of it to save our life. All we can get out of chicken feed. And so he said, I'll tell you what you do. You will have to sharpen that rock. So you have to sharpen that rock and get it where it grinds. And I said, well, how you sharpen a rock? I don't know nothing about that. And so he showed me some old tools that were laying up there. In fact, there was an old hammer with some looked like a steak hammer that a housewife might have, you know, with them points on it. And but they're made out of steel. And so he showed me how to do it. I had to peck that rock and get it where it would be rough and everything. And so I worked 2 days and 2 nights doing what he told me to do. I put that stone back down, and I believe it was worse that time than it was last time. So I went back to see him. And he was sitting in the pack house grading the biker that day. And so I told him, I said, Mr. Ashley, this ain't working. What I done to it ain't working. And so he sort of giggled a little bit about it, you know. And I know what he was saying, man, you're too dumb for anything, you know. And but anyhow, I talked him into coming back and showed me something else. And so he told me then, he said, when you peck that stone, you peck too big of holes in it, and that's why it don't grind good meal. So he told me how to take a straight 2x4 and paint that 2x4 with smut out of your heater and slide it all over that stone. And everywhere you had a little black spot, come back and pick it off. And you do that over and over and over until everything, you had black spots all over the whole stone, see. And so that took 2 more days and 2 more nights, and got that done. Well, I said, well, I ain't going back and get him. I'm going to crank this thing up and see what's going on. And it got worse instead of better. I said, oh my goodness, what am I doing wrong? So I went back to see him. And of course, I reckon he thought I was going to worry clean to death. And but he said, I'll be over right a while and look at it. So he come over here and I cranked it up, and it started freewheeling, you know, sort of like, well, it won't touch it. The top stone was not touching the bottom stone. I had pecked so much stone off of it. And so he said, have you got a pipe wrench? I said, yeah. He said, well, go get that pipe wrench, and you go under that stone under there, and there's 4 bolts under there. You turn each one of them bolts 2 rounds. Well, what that did, it raised the bottom stone up to where the top stone would hit it. That's all the problem I had to start with. And I had worked 4 nights and 4 days all day and trying to get it corrected. but I was so stupid I didn't know what to do. And inexperienced, that's a better word, you know, but I think I was a little bit of both of them. And, but anyhow, I got that stone going. This same guy, though, a few years later, he got charter farming and all, and he came over here and worked with me for about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't know how long it was, a long time there. He came and worked with me. And so that's the story of getting the first pound of meal ground in this mill after I come here. And but it's been a lot of work, a great experience, and I told my wife after about 3 years here, and of course my wife, she come to help me work too, you know. The first year I was here, she had to work at a shirt factory so we could keep eating regular, you know. And but after about 3 years, she come down to help me. And sometime along that time, I went to the house one Saturday at lunchtime, and so I told her, I said, I don't know if we're gonna make it or not. And I said, I'm working day and night, and I ain't moving ahead. We're just not moving forward. I mean, you know, and which I had realized by that time that we had 2,000 grist mills in this county, in the state, say 60 years earlier, and now we were down to about 30. There's something wrong with the industry. I mean, you know, and we done lost 90% of our grist mills in the last 40 years. Well, it wasn't because all of them got tired of work and went home. It was because business had gone down that much. After World War II, all the housewives went to work, and they had money in their pocket. That's the first time families had ever had a little bit of disposable income, really, in this part of the country, most of us. And so the man was working, his wife was working. They both bring some money in on Friday, and man, they could go to the picture show if they wanted to, you know. And they could go out and get some hot dogs that night if they wanted to. Now that was a little different than what it was a few years earlier too. So, in the way I was raised. So they also, when they got that money in their pocket, they pretty much quit cooking too. A lot of them quit cooking. And so, you know, cornbread is something, you don't mix water with it and throw it on the table. You mix some water with it and you put it in the stove for a little while. And that won't get done a lot. So it cut into the sales on this type of product. But, and so what happened was, everybody else was going out of this kind of business, and here I was going into it. Now that was not a good business way to do things, but so we were in a struggle. I went to the house, I don't know, after a couple of years, 3 years, whatever, and we had some hush puppies or something every single day on that table. Now, I mean, we lived on cornbread and molasses. Now, you could go up to the store up here, and they had that 50-gallon drum of blackstrap molasses, and you could draw half a gallon of that stuff out and take all this cornbread we had, and you get by pretty good for a few days. And especially if somebody went fishing and caught a mess of fish and give them to you. I mean, you were really in good shape now. Went to the house one day, and my wife Betty, she had cooked some hush puppies, had a bowl of hush puppies sitting on the table when I walked in about lunchtime. And of course, the first thing I ever done, I reach over and get me a hush puppy when I walk in there. But I didn't know for sure if I was making this stuff where it wouldn't kill nobody or not. And but so far I've been okay for the last couple of years. Nobody hadn't died from eating it, you know. But I got that hush puppy, I picked it up, and that thing was as green as any green paint you ever saw. And it scared me to death, because I know I had done something wrong somewhere or another. And I mean, after all this work, I'm gonna be out of business, show it the world, because everybody's cornbread is green today. I'm in trouble. And so the first thing that popped in my mind is what I asked her. I said, Mother, what in the hell is wrong with these hush puppies? And she went to laughing. She had put green cake coloring in them hush puppies. And I've said a many times, that's the only time I ever thought about divorcing that woman. she put green cake coloring in my hush puppy, and it scared me clean to death. And but it's been a wonderful experience. We like raised every one of our kids right down here in this old mill house, and I tell people different places. We had 6 children, and I tell people that somehow or another we wound up having a new one about every 3 months. And what we would do is have a playpen over in this corner and a baby crib in this corner. And when we'd have a new baby, after a couple of 3 weeks there, we put that new baby in the crib and move that one down to the playpen, you know. And so we kept two of them confined all the time, you know, in here. But those babies, though, there's a lot of racket in here, you know, and bagging meal, old machine, banging and all that stuff. And you could put a baby in the crib there at 3 or 4 weeks old, and every time the old bagging machine make a big fuss, you know, he'd jump. But that didn't happen but about 3 or 4 times before he got loving it. And you could do anything in the world you wanted down here. They were easy to look after. If you ever carried one of them to the house where it was quiet, you had a problem. So they really enjoyed being down here, and anytime we had somebody come by, you know, they always coming in here and seeing them and all that stuff. And when they got big enough now, I'd stand them over at the window with a fishing pole when they got 4 or 5 years old, and I'd tie a rope around them, and then I'd go back and tie the other, you know, that rope to a post so they couldn't fall out the window, and they could stand there and fish. Well, how many kids in this world can go to the window and fish? Not many. But that was the early years. That was early years, and but after I told her that I didn't think we were going to make it, you know, and we won't do it making never plain cornmeal. That's all any of the meals around were making, and so people were getting into like breaders and hush puppy mixes and things like that a little bit. So I said, well, I got to learn how to do that too. So I got playing around, and I wouldn't even tell you how many products we developed over the years, but it was a bunch. And but actually, it put us on the market where we could get that housewife's dollar for this, and that housewife's dollar for this, and that housewife's dollar for that. And then we went into the chicken pastry business, and that chicken pastry has done a wonderful job for us. Of course, we make cornbread sticks for all these restaurants that use cornbread sticks. You know, we pre-bake those sticks for them. And I went up in the mountains, and they had an old oven up there that they were fixing to throw in the junk pile. And so I gave the man $500 for it and brought it home. And a new oven like that was way over $100,000. I couldn't even think about that. But I took that old $500 oven and got in there and worked on it, and built some burners to go in it, and this, that, and the other. So we've been using that thing for, I don't know, 40 years now. And baking cornbread sticks, and baking flat cornbread. But the chicken pastry has just been a wonderful thing. And of course, we make a lot of hush puppies now. We started making frozen hush puppies. And so we make a lot of hush puppies for cookout. Cookout right now has got 300 restaurants, a little over 300 restaurants, and they use our hush puppies for every one of them. And so that's been a blessing to us, sure has. Even having a rough start like we did, and I've told a lot of people, especially church groups that come by and we talked about things, and I'll ask them, I said, have you guys ever seen one day in your life that you just thought nothing is going right? I don't know how am I going to make it, and all this stuff. I mean, you know, we all complain a lot. Even though our belly is full, we still complain. But, and I tell them, I said, have you ever had a day in your life when you looked up and said, Lord, have you forgot him over here? I really need you today. You know, I said, I had a lot of them days. And I imagine a lot of people has had those days. But if you really get to thinking about it after the fact, you understand that, look, I was still walking. I wasn't crippled up. I had halfway decent brain, you know. And I had so much to be thankful for, even those days when I thought everything in the world was going wrong. That you know, I still give him the credit for everything I've accomplished. Now this is a sifter. Actually, I think it was made to be a flour sifter to start with, and but all it is a shaft with a screen going around it, and your product goes in the middle and it sifts all the way through the screen and comes out somewhere else to your next piece of equipment. And but this one. This company right here is still in business, and they got to be a major company over the years. But in 1984, they were probably about like we are right here. They were a little bit of a small company and probably had 2 people working. And but that's the way all companies started. That's the way Henry Ford done with his first car. And he'd be amazed now to see all the cars on the road. This is a double ear corn sheller, and I'm not sure it's the first one that was ever built, but you can shell 2 ears of corn at a time. When you turn the handle on the side, you can shell 2 ears of corn at a time, and that was a major improvement way back when everybody had to shell their corn by hand. And if you had an old tractor or an old car that you could put a belt on the back wheel, it had a pulley on it that you could hook up to a belt, and that thing would shell corn automatically then. But didn't see too many of those, just one once in a while. If you had a double ear sheller, then you were probably a more important farmer than most of us were. Our next corn sheller over here, like I say, Thomas Burrow built this thing in 1840. This was the first corn sheller that was ever built. This style, I'll put it that way, in 1840. First corn sheller that was ever built. That when your cob fell out and your corn fell out, it was all mixed together. It did not separate the. This one separated the cob out of the corn, so you didn't have to fish your corn cobs out of the corn after you got it shelled. And this next machine right here was built in 1855 by this guy out of Vermont, and it was one of the nicest weighing instruments ever built. Every feed mill in the United States, if they were doing anything at all, they had one of these scales. And I mean, I would hate to predict or guess how many of these scales were ever sold, but it could be in the thousands, easy. And of course, the next one there is the first old scale we ever put in here after the mill burned in 1950, and it came back in 1951. That was the machine that they bought and put in here a little bit before my time, and and it was a fancy machine at that time. You had to put your bag on there by hand, then you had to mash a pedal with your foot, and it would get somewhere close to 2 pounds if that's what you had to sit on. But all this machinery right here, none of this is in use today, but it played a very important part in the lives of a lot of people back when it came out and when it was in use. Now these are actual millstones and probably cut out of a mountain boulder somewhere, and you have to be real careful about where you get a stone from, because all stones are not hard enough to run together and grind. Some of these stones are soft and they won't last very long. Now, if you get a wonderful stone, a great stone that'll last over 200 years running every day, you got to get it out of France. The French stone is the only one in the world that's made out of a volcanic lava that has the right chemical content to make a good stone. And that's ironic, because most places in the world that you have volcanic lava, after it gets cool, you can go out there and break a piece with your fingers after it cools off and everything. But this stone has the right chemical content in it that it's when it cools down, it makes a real hard stone, and that's what we need for grinding. Millstones would travel around a lot, wherever they were needed at. But this is the kind of stone that we use every day here for grinding meal. Okay, these are flat pulleys. We run a flat belt on them, and up until probably 50, 75 years ago, you would see these flat belts everywhere. And you got the flat pulleys. You can't get as much traction on these flat pulleys, but almost all industry now, if they got belts, they've gone to V-belt pulleys. And you can take a little small V-belt pulley and do the same thing I can do with a 6 or 8 inch flat belt as far as traction and all. But this is the way it was, and this is the way we want it to look today, because we're trying to bring as much history back as we can. We got a water wheel, what we call a turbine, and it's down in the bottom of the river, and about 10 foot below the surface of the water. And we let the water in the pond rush through the turbine, and when it does rush through there, it turns some impellers and everything into some paddles in the turbine, and that's what makes these pulleys here run then. So we transfer all this power over to the next equipment, and every time you get to a piece of equipment, you just come right off and run a belt to it. And if you want something to run a different speed, you would take, start out with a small pulley on the power side, and then on the equipment side put a big pulley, and that would slow that machine down. If you wanted it to go faster, you put a big pulley on the power side and a little pulley on the machine, and that would speed that equipment up. So that's what we've had to do throughout this whole situation here, is try to get this piece of equipment to run the right speed and the next one to run the right speed, and none of them don't run the same speed. And so it's been a little challenge. This is a machine that does a great job making grits, old stone ground grits. And it was built in North Wilkesboro, right here in North Carolina, back in 1908. And it still does a good job. And it has the stones like you were just looking at a while ago, that's the kind of stones that are in this machine. And they're vertical stones, they're not flat, they're sitting up vertical. And that's why they work really good for grits. And of course you got elevators that take the corn up and drop it into the machine. You got another elevator that picks that ground corn up and turns it over to the sifters, and so it's a continuous thing. The corn is moving from one place to the next all the time, and directly it gets to the point where you can bag it out over here. These are sifters. This is not a new sifter. This is an old style sifting method, where you got a big drum and you just put some screen wire around it, and anything that goes through that screen wire is ready to eat, and what don't go through that screen wire has got to have further processing or either put in hog feed or something or other. But that's the purpose of your sifter. You wouldn't want to be eating anything and wind up with whole grains of corn in it, so that's what your sifter does. It takes out the big particles, and so you don't have to wind up with that. So we got on the grits, we have to use two sifters, because one of them sifts out all the big stuff, and then you run it to the next sifter, and it sifts out all the little stuff, and what's in the middle is what you make your grits out of. This is a flat stone here. This is what we've always used right here now, is a flat stone. In other words, I was telling you about the one down there that is vertical. This one is flat. So you got two stones. You got one running on top of the other one, and you got corn that's dribbling in, right, slowly dribbling in the top. And when it gets down to where those stones meet, it starts grinding the corn up and making meal out of it. And it works the same way for it being sifted and all. It goes up, your finished product goes in an elevator, and it goes up high and then drops into another sifter over there. And what goes through that sifter is what we're looking for is a finished product. But it's not a complicated situation unless you walk in here like I did a long time ago and didn't know what you were doing. That was complicated back then. You're looking at wooden pulleys. Well, you call them wooden wheels if you want to, and this goes back to say like in 17th century. If you wanted a steel wheel, you had to order that thing from England, and because I mean we hadn't established any ironworks over here yet, and steel factories and all that stuff. So what the people would do if they wanted a wheel, they were pretty good carpenters. So it might take 2 or 3 people getting together with all their ideas, but they could build just about anything they wanted. One person had a talent for this, and another person had a talent for something else. And so that's the way they got their wheels. And it's like I was telling a guy last week, back then if you wanted a bearing, you know, like a wheel bearing or anything in a wagon or whatever, I mean, if you didn't have that steel hub like they had in later years, you could holler out a piece of log and run a wooden shaft through it and pack corn cobs around that shaft with some old axle grease or something, or some lard, and you had you a bearing. In other words, you could run that wagon down the road with a corn cob bearing. And if anybody's ever been familiar with corn cobs, they are tough. Corn cobs are tough. And so you put a little axle grease on them and drive them in a hole, and they stay right there, and you think you got a Bolton Berry, and you know.